I didn't think much about that road when I left. Just a strip of dusty gravel cutting straight through my land. Same as it had been for decades. Same tire tracks, same ruts, same old fence posts leaning like they were tired of standing guard. It wasn't pretty, but it was mine. And that mattered. I was gone for 3 days. Livestock expo out in Amarillo, long hours, bad coffee, shaking hands with people who talk more about cattle genetics than their own families. And when I came back, I honestly thought I'd taken the wrong turn. Because where my road used to be, there was this shiny, jet-black stretch of asphalt, smooth like a fresh scar, still smelling like tar under the afternoon heat, with painted curbs, decorative lampposts, lined up like it was some suburban postcard. I remember just sitting there in my truck for a second, engine running, staring at it like my brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. Because no one paves over a man's private road without asking. But that's exactly what they did. And they didn't even have the decency to tell me in person. No phone call, no knock, no conversation. Just a piece of paper taped to my gate, flapping in the wind like it was proud of itself. I walked up, pulled it off, and read it once. Then again, just to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. In accordance with community beautification standards, the roadway has been upgraded for the benefit of all residents. Residents. That word stuck with me, because I wasn't one of them. My land, 53 acres of dirt, cattle, sweat, and stubborn independence, sat right up against their neighborhood, but it wasn't part of it. Never had been. And that neighborhood, man, it looked like something out of a magazine. Trimmed hedges so perfect they didn't look real, pastel-colored houses lined up like they were auditioning for a commercial, and palm trees, imported palm trees, in a place where winter actually bites. It always felt fake, like someone took a city dream and tried to glue it onto country soil. Years ago, their HOA president, back when it was some guy named Darren, all smiles and handshake energy, came over asking if they could use my road as a shortcut. Said it'd shave 5 minutes off their commute to the highway. 5 minutes. That's all it was. And I said yes. Not because I had to, but because it felt neighborly. We shook hands. No paperwork, no money, just trust. And for a while, that's all it was. Folks would drive through, wave sometimes, mostly not, but it was fine. It didn't cost me anything, until it did. Standing there, holding that letter, looking at that road that no longer looked like mine, something shifted. Not loud, not explosive, just quiet, controlled anger settling in like a storm that hasn't broken yet. Because this wasn't just about asphalt. This was about someone deciding they had the right to change something that didn't belong to them, and expecting me to just go along with it. I walked the length of that road, boots crunching on the edges where gravel still peeked through, running my hand along one of those decorative lamp posts like I needed to confirm it was real, and all I could think was, these people didn't forget to ask. They chose not to. That's different. That's intentional. And intentional disrespect, that sticks. I got back in my truck, drove up to the house, and sat there for a while, just thinking. Not reacting. Not yet. Because here's the thing. Anger makes people sloppy. And I didn't want sloppy. I wanted precise. I wanted them to understand exactly what they'd done, and exactly who they'd done it to. So I didn't call anyone. Didn't tear anything up. Didn't storm into their little HOA office. Instead, I walked out to my equipment shed, and there it was. This old cattle gate I'd had for years. Heavy-duty steel, 10 feet tall, the kind of thing you don't move unless you mean it. And as I stood there, looking at it, I started to smile. Not a big smile, just enough to know I'd already figured out my next move. Because they turned my road into their boulevard, without asking. And I was about to remind them, real clear, that it was still mine. Now let me slow this down for a second, because what happened here, it's not just drama, it's textbook. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA, you'll recognize the pattern real quick. According to standard procedure, an HOA only has authority over properties that are legally within its jurisdiction, meaning you signed into it, or your land is formally tied to it through recorded covenants. I didn't sign anything. Never did. My land sat next to theirs, not inside it. That's a hard line, legally speaking. From a legal perspective, what they did, that's unauthorized modification of private property, plain and simple. Doesn't matter if they thought it was improving it. Doesn't matter if the residents benefited. Intent doesn't override ownership. And that handshake deal from years ago? That wasn't a transfer of rights. It was permission, revocable, informal, and completely dependent on goodwill. The moment they crossed that line, that permission was gone. But here's where it gets interesting, because this isn't just about law, it's about mindset. This is a psychological trap a lot of these communities fall into. When people operate inside structured environments like HOAs, they get used to control, rules, uniformity, and over time, they start assuming that structure extends beyond its actual boundaries. It's subtle, but dangerous. They stop seeing someone else's property and start seeing an unregulated problem that needs fixing. That's how you end up with decisions like this. No conversation, no consent, just action. And in their heads, it probably felt justified. Beautification, efficiency, community benefit. But none of that gives you ownership. The lesson here is simple, but people miss it all the time. Access is not control, and convenience is not permission. The moment you confuse those two, you're setting yourself up for a very expensive correction. And trust me, they were about to learn that the hard way. So that night, I didn't make a speech, didn't send a warning, didn't ask for a meeting. I just got to work. The sky was already going dark, that deep country kind of quiet settling in, the kind where you can hear your own boots on gravel. Well, what little gravel they hadn't buried, and I fired up the tractor. That engine cut through the silence like a statement, low and steady, and I drove it straight down that brand new boulevard like I owned every inch of it, because I did. The asphalt was still fresh enough that you could smell it, warm and sharp, and those cute little lampposts they'd installed cast this soft suburban glow across land that had never asked for it. I remember thinking, man, they really went all out. Without asking the one person they should have asked. I reached the midpoint of the road, backed the tractor up slow, then pulled that cattle gate off the trailer. 10 feet of solid steel. Not decorative, not negotiable, just pure function. It took me a while to position it right, lining it up so it cut clean across the road. No gaps, no wiggle room, and then I bolted it in. Every turn of the wrench felt intentional, not rushed, not emotional, just deliberate. When I finally snapped that heavy chain through and locked it, I stepped back and looked at it for a second. That brand new suburban shortcut, now split in half by something that didn't care how pretty it was. Then I killed the engine, let the silence come back, and went inside like nothing had happened. By sunrise it had. First call came in before I'd even finished my coffee. Some number I didn't recognize, ignored it. Then another. Then another. By the time I stepped outside, my phone looked like it had been in a fight. Voicemails stacked up, messages coming in, all variations of the same tone, confused, irritated, demanding. I listened to one. Hi. This is Melissa from the Brook Hollow Estates HOA office. We've received multiple reports that access through the Community Connector Road has been obstructed. We need you to click. Didn't bother finishing it. Because I already knew what they needed. They needed their shortcut back. And they weren't getting it. By mid-morning, the tone shifted. Less polite. More urgent. Then came the legal guy. You can always tell. It's the way they talk. Like every sentence has been ironed flat. Sir, you are currently blocking what is being used as a public access roadway. And if this obstruction is not removed immediately, we will pursue. I actually laughed at that one. Out loud. Because that's the thing. They were still operating under their version of reality, not mine. And mine had paperwork. Around noon, I saw her, walking up the drive like she owned the place, or thought she did. Heather Collins, new HOA president. Took over sometime after Darren moved out, and from what I'd heard, she ran things a little tighter, a little more by the book, at least when it came to everyone else. She had that look, perfect posture, pearls, sunglasses too expensive for this zip code, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I stepped out onto the porch before she could knock. You're blocking a public roadway, she said. No hello, no introduction, just straight into accusation like she'd rehearsed it. I leaned against the railing, took a second, let the silence stretch just enough to make her uncomfortable. No, I said, calm as I could be. I'm blocking my road. She didn't like that. You could see it in the way her jaw tightened, just slightly. This road has been integrated into the Brook Hollow community infrastructure. Integrated. That was the word she chose. Like they'd absorbed it, like it belonged to them now because they decided it did. I stepped inside for a second, grabbed the folder I'd already pulled out that morning, and came back with it. Property deed. Survey maps. Clean, clear lines showing exactly where my land started and where theirs ended. I handed it to her, watched her eyes scan it, watched the confidence flicker, not disappear, just adjust. You've been using it, I said, because I allowed it. That's over. She handed the papers back like they'd offended her. You're going to regret this, she said, voice dropping just enough to feel like a threat. We'll take legal action. I shrugged. Already ahead of you. That part caught her off guard. Because while they were busy laying asphalt and planting palm trees that didn't belong here, I'd been making calls. Sheriff's office filed a report for property alteration without consent. Civil attorney filed for damages. And the part one knew would really sting. I'd sent drone footage of their little construction project, start to finish, along with the full story, to a local news station that loves nothing more than a good HOA overreach headline. Heather didn't say much after that, just gave me that tight smile again, turned, and walked back toward her car like she was already recalculating. And that's when things really started to shift. Because up until that point, this was just between me and them. But once the residents got involved, oh, it got louder. See, that 5-minute shortcut they'd been enjoying? It wasn't just convenience. It had become part of their routine. School drop-offs, commutes, grocery runs, all built around that little slice of my land they thought was permanent. Now, it was gone, and the alternative route added 15, 20 minutes, depending on traffic. That kind of inconvenience doesn't stay quiet in a neighborhood like that. It spreads. Fast. Group chats lit up. Emails flew. People started asking questions, real questions. Did we actually have the right to do that? Why wasn't this approved properly? Who signed off on paving someone else's property? And suddenly, Heather wasn't dealing with me anymore. She was dealing with them. By day 3, I saw it firsthand. A couple of residents drove up to the gate, got out, looked at it like it had personally offended them, then just stood there, not mad at me, but confused, frustrated. One guy actually waved me down. Hey man, he said, is there any way you could just open it back up? Not demanding, just tired. I shook my head. Not after what they did. He sighed, nodded like he understood more than he wanted to admit, and drove off the long way. And that's when I knew it wasn't going to take long. Pressure like that builds quick when it's coming from inside. By the end of the week, I got the call. Not from a lawyer this time. From Heather. Different tone. Softer. Controlled. But you could hear the strain underneath. We'd like to discuss a resolution, she said. I told her she could come by. This time, when she walked up, the pearls were still there, but the confidence wasn't as sharp. She didn't waste time. We're prepared to remove the asphalt, restore the original gravel, and compensate you for damages, triple the estimated cost. It sounded like a good deal. On paper, it probably was. But here's the thing. They weren't offering that because they felt sorry. They were offering it because they needed that road back. And that changed the math. I let a little silence hang there again, just long enough. Then I shook my head. No, that word landed heavier than anything else I'd said all week. She blinked, like she hadn't prepared for that outcome. Then what exactly do you want? She asked. And that's when I laid it out. Calm. Simple. No drama. You can keep your road, I said. All of it. The asphalt, the lights, the whole upgrade. But if you want to use it, I paused, just a beat, you rent it. She stared at me. Not angry this time. Just processing. For $1,000 a month, I continued, paid on time. Miss one payment. I nodded toward the gate. It stays closed. You could almost hear the gears turning in her head. Legal, financial, political. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about fixing a mistake without losing control in front of her residents. And deep down, she knew they didn't have leverage. Not anymore. A couple days later, the contract came through. Clean. Signed. And just like that, their community improvement became the most expensive shortcut in the county. Now, every month, like clockwork, that check shows up. I cash it, go about my day, sometimes drive that tractor right past those neat little houses and perfectly trimmed hedges. And every time I do, I can't help but smile a little. Because they tried to take something that wasn't theirs and ended up paying for it. Every single month. Now here's the part people always ask me about. Usually with that half smile, like they're trying to decide if what I did was clever or just plain stubborn. And the truth is, it's both. But more than that, it's a reminder of how fast things can go sideways when people start confusing convenience with entitlement. Because let's be honest, this whole thing didn't start with bad intentions, at least not on the surface. It started with a shortcut. 5 minutes saved, a little easier commute, a small favor between neighbors. That's how most boundary problems begin, not with conflict, but with comfort. And comfort has a way of rewriting rules in people's heads. The longer something works in your favor, the more it starts to feel like it belongs to you. That's human nature. But it's also where things get dangerous. Because the moment you stop recognizing something as borrowed, you stop asking permission. And that's exactly what happened here. This is a psychological trap that plays out everywhere, not just in neighborhoods, workplaces, friendships, even families. Access becomes routine, routine becomes expectation, and expectation turns into assumption. And once assumption sets in, people don't think they're overstepping anymore. They think they're correcting something that should have already been theirs. That's how you end up with a group of well-dressed homeowners paving over a road they don't own, and genuinely believing they're in the right. From a legal perspective, though, reality doesn't bend like that. Ownership is black and white. You either have the right, or you don't. There's no clause in property law that says, but it was convenient, or, but everyone benefited. It doesn't work that way. And honestly, that's a good thing. Because without that clarity, situations like this wouldn't just be frustrating, they'd be constant. According to standard procedure, any modification to land requires explicit permission from the owner. Not implied, not assumed, explicit. And skipping that step doesn't just make you rude, it makes you liable. Financially, legally, publicly, if it gets that far. And in this case, it did. But here's where it gets a little more personal. Because yeah, I could have taken their first offer. Let them rip out the asphalt, write me a check, and we all move on like nothing happened. Clean ending. Simple. But that wouldn't have fixed the real issue. The lesson here is, consequences need to match behavior. Not out of revenge, but out of correction. If they'd walked away with nothing more than a repair bill, what would they have learned? That overstepping is fine, as long as you're willing to pay for the cleanup afterward. That's not a lesson, that's a loophole. What changed things wasn't the money. It was the structure, the agreement, the fact that every single month, they're reminded, this isn't theirs. It never was. And now, it costs them to use it. That's accountability. And accountability sticks a lot longer than a one-time penalty. But let me flip this for a second, because I know someone listening is thinking, okay, but what if the situation was reversed? Fair question. If I had let that road turn into something more formal, if I'd signed papers, joined their HOA, agreed to shared control, then yeah, different story. Then I'd be part of that system, and I'd have to play by those rules. That's the trade-off. Structure comes with benefits, but also limits. The problem here wasn't the improvement itself. I mean, I'll admit, it's a nicer road now. Smoother ride, better drainage, looks like it belongs in a brochure. The problem was the assumption. The decision made without the person who actually had the authority to say yes or no. That's the line. Cross that, and everything else becomes irrelevant. And here's something else people don't talk about enough. Respect isn't just about being polite. It's about recognizing boundaries even when they inconvenience you. Especially then, because that's when it counts. It's easy to respect someone's space when it doesn't cost you anything. It's harder when it adds 20 minutes to your commute. But that's the test. That's where character shows up. And in this case, it didn't. Not at first, anyway. To their credit, they adapted. Eventually, they owned the mistake, maybe not publicly, maybe not the way they should have, but they adjusted. Signed a contract. Accepted the terms. And in their world, that probably felt like a loss. But in reality, it was a correction, a reset, something that brought things back to where they should have been from the start. Clear lines, clear ownership, clear consequences. So if you're watching this and thinking about your own situation, maybe it's not a road, maybe it's something smaller. Just remember this. Boundaries don't disappear just because people get used to crossing them. And the longer you wait to reinforce them, the harder it gets to do it cleanly. That doesn't mean you go looking for fights. It just means you don't ignore the ones that quietly build over time. Because those are the ones that end up costing the most. Not always in money, but in principle. And once that's gone, it's a lot harder to get back than a stretch of gravel road. So yeah, every month, that check comes in. For $1,000. Right on time. And every time I see it, I don't think about the money. I think about that first moment, standing there, staring at a road that didn't look like mine anymore, and deciding, right then and there, that it was going to be again, just on my terms. And hey, I'm curious, What would you have done in that situation? Would you have taken the payout and walked away, or done exactly what I did? Let me know.